we're in Wise County, Virginia, not West Virginia.
First story in Virginia.
Virginia. We came all this way to do a video about a very, very interesting man named John Wesley Wright, also known as the Devil. He had several nicknames that people, friends and foe, gave to him. Bad John Wright, Devil John, the Tall Sycamore, the Law of Pine Mountain. There's several books and numerous newspaper articles have been written about him. Tolliver, in the novel The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, was based on the life of John Wright. So what makes him so interesting? People want to write books about him, tell his story. Do you know?
Me?
So he was an infamous lawman here in Wise County, which borders Letcher County, Kentucky. He lived in both places. He was a native of Letcher County, Kentucky. He had a home here in Pound, Virginia, basically is where we're at. And he also had a home in Letcher County. He had several wives. He was polygamous, and he had over 30 children. So they used to say that he had a wife on top of every mountaintop. So he had quite a few homes, and he was not ashamed of it. He was very, very good to his wives and very good to his children. So what about him makes him so special to bring us out here? Well, when he was a lawman in the late 1800s, courtrooms became peaceful with him in it. You had to understand that back then, a lot of courtrooms and lawmen could not persecute people doing wrong things because they were intimidated, and they were also scared of being killed, which actually did happen. So John Wesley Wright was, for lack of better terms, he was a badass.
Right.
And he was brave, he was fearless, and he didn't play. So when he came into courtrooms, he would set his gun down next to him with his hand off of it, which was pretty much a statement to the judge and the people in there saying, you're safe, you're fine. And it worked. The courtrooms became very peaceful with Devil John's presence in the back of the courtroom and his quiet word, "Your Honor, you can go along with your proceedings now. I'll be staying around for a while." Now, Devil John was born on the Kentucky River near Kona in Letcher County. John was the second child born to Joel Ellis and Eliza Agnes Bates Wright, which made him a grandson of two of Letcher County's most prominent pioneer families, the Joel Wright and John Wallace Bates family. He joined the Confederate Army against the Union in the Civil War, and he trained at Fort Smith, Arkansas, and fought for an unknown amount of time for the Confederacy until he was captured during a raid by Ohio regular Union troops in Kentucky in the early 1863. He was then conscripted into the Union Army and fought alongside them. He switched sides. When John was asked why he changed sides during the war, he was only shrug and say they didn't give him much choice. Indeed, on his conscription papers, John and one other man were described as being replacements for fallen soldiers within the Ohio unit, with the alternative of conscription as being executed. So, you can't really blame him. During this time with the Ohio unit, John was shot 3 times, once in the stomach in Cynthiana, Kentucky, which nearly killed him, once in the triceps of his right arm at the mouth of Boones Creek, Tennessee, and once in his hip during a battle in Tennessee, which forever gave him a stiff walk that he was known for. So he served 18 months in the Union Army and was honorably discharged in Columbus, Ohio in 1864. It was known that he was a fierce fighter on the battlefield, and it was there that he honed in his sharpshooting and killing instinct that made him a reputable man once he came back to Letcher County.
After the Civil War, John traveled for a few years and learned the trade of husbandry and sold horses that he took from Kentucky all throughout the southern states. This gave him a hunger for seeing the world, but the nation was by and large very poor, and John found himself hard-pressed to find funds. So he found himself, like many other men after the Civil War, looking for employment. But John had an idea and found himself hunting down an uncle of his that was in a circus known as the Robinson Circus. This uncle, known as Martin Brother Bates, was known as a Kentucky giant. He stood 7 foot 4 inches tall and weighed over 400 pounds. Brother Bates was happy to see his favored nephew and took him in and gave him a job in the circus as a sharpshooter. John would ride bareback or saddled on any horse and shoot bottles off of barrels as the horse galloped along. John would also do this while standing on the horse or even 2 horses at full gallop.
Jeez.
John would also do his tricks while standing on the horse or even 2 horses at full gallop. He even had tricks that made him famous, such as doing a flip off the back of the horse while firing his pistols. His time in the Robinson Circus took him to many countries around the world and satiated his desire to travel. It took him to England, where he got to perform in front of Queen Victoria and even met her in person. John eventually found his way back to the mountains and into the arms of his first wife, Maddie Humphrey. With Maddie, John fathered 3 children and established himself in Wise, Virginia, where he would live out most of the rest of his days. John, however, would not find Maddie enough for his wild mannerisms, and soon took another wife in 1869, and then another, and then another, and another, and yet one more after that. All told, John had 6 wives and fathered 31 children, often with multiple wives in the same year. It was quite the joke to the family and the community at large that John had a wife for every mountaintop, but no one told that to John's face. Because of John's restless libido, his blood had been spread all over the southeast of the United States, and many claimed him in their lineage, and rightly do so. John wasn't ashamed of his polygamy, and he was a staunch protector of every one of his children. As he grew in stature throughout Wise County and in the Cumberlands, he grew in wealth, always made sure that all of his children were taken care of. John always insisted that his children attend school whenever it was available, and told them that a man could not live by his hands alone in this world. John's main source of income was through farming and husbandry of horses, but his restless ways took him into the arms of the law. His first ventures as a lawman was as a deputy marshal, and would bounty hunt at any and every opportunity, mostly because it would get him away from his wives and farms and let him travel. During this time, which started around 1871, and in fact ever since he came home from the circus and Civil War, he was building a reputation for himself as a man to not be crossed. He was a fierce enemy of Devil Anse Hatfield, but could never capture him or Cap, who he desired to get his hands on. John was known to be fair and would remain so all of his life, but he would also not hesitate to draw his gun on you. Because of this, he was surnamed Devil or Bad John Wright. John would say that he never liked killing a man, but instead liked to bring them home and hand them over to the law. An exact account of how many men John had killed over the years is not known, but it was very many as rumors go, as many as 30, but he said himself it was 4, and they were rightful killings. In the 1890s, the law of the land in southeast Kentucky and southwest Virginia was simple. There wasn't any. Men killed and robbed without consequence. But there are lots of other tales of his feats of justice that always pointed that John was a fair and just man. And so this reputation inevitably led him to become Sheriff of Wise County, Virginia in 1896. This was as much as John to show his great family and community that he was not only their father, but also their protector and the keeper of the peace. The Civil War may have hardened John for this part of his life, but he was ruthless when he needed to be, and none was ever known to escape his sights.
Except Devil Anse and Cap.
Yeah, he never caught them.
Well, we literally came on top of a mountain in Virginia trying to find John's grave, but he is not up here. So we're going to look a little bit more
Graveyard.
There's just so many cemeteries, and the directions, as usual, aren't correct. So where it says he's buried is just a house, no cemetery. But this is a really pretty area, and there's 2 abandoned houses here that are beautiful. It's so quiet here. I mean, look, this one looks really nice right here, and this is empty.
Both of them are, I believe.
Yeah, they're both empty. That one and that one. I mean, it's totally isolated. There's no neighbors except down the hill there. So we're gonna look a little bit more. Wish us luck. So we are actually at the George Washington and Jefferson National Forest, and John Wesley Wright lived just a couple minutes from here. We just talked to someone who was born and raised here, and he pointed out where he lived. The cemetery that we think he's at is all grown over with kudzu, and we just can't find it. And we went through a lot of work to get up there the first time, and I'm not so sure we're gonna go back. So we can't park here, so we gotta walk. But I think this is a fitting spot to end the story. It's a few minutes from where he lived here in Pound, Virginia. I can see why he wanted to live here. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So Devil John would continue his rambling, killing ways well into his early 70s. He was a known drinker and gambler, and loved to make his own brandy, which had been deemed the only good thing that an apple was good for, according to him. But he was also a lover of his wife's children, and took good care of the workers who tended his lands. John also was a lukewarm man as far as Christian faith goes. He would often go to church with his first wife when the mood struck him, but he was a very simple man of prayer. He always insisted that his children go to church and not take after his ways. But all that changed March of 1925 when his first wife, Maddie, passed away. This seemed to change John. He began going to church more regular. A warm morning on July 24th, 1929, Devil John finally decided to shed the skin of his former life and became a man of God. In Fairview, Virginia, on that July morning, he was baptized, and then John did change his ways. He retired back to his favorite farm in Wise, Virginia, and watched his children grow and play. He spent time with his grandchildren. He became fiery about his devotion to Christian faith, and he did keep his word. He retook his Christian name of John Wesley Wright and dropped the devil for good. He also dropped his firearms, never shot one ever again, he said. But this change would be short-lived, because on a cold, snowy day on January the 30th, 1931, John Wesley Wright passed away at his home at the ripe age of 87 with his second wife and a few of his children by his bedside. The doctor with him said he died of heart failure. John was buried 2 days later in Wise, a few minutes from here, actually, somewhere. And thousands attended his funeral. Tears and brandy were split at the services that followed, as the legend of this man was told by dear friends and family. In the end, he had family, friends, and a full life with people who truly loved him, something a lot of us will never know in this life. This speaks a lot of his character to me. Was he a devil? Maybe, if you're on his wrong side. Rest in peace, John Wesley Wright, lawman, father, husband, friend, and fearless man of Wise County. And thank you for joining us for another Hillbilly Files story here in beautiful Virginia. And until next time,
We will see you on the Hillbilly Files.
out of Virginia, we're out.